I can't stay in one area of teaching or research for a long time. And I realized that that's part of the way of thinking that we as humans need. We need to be finding ways to get better every day and find new ways of doing things to allow us to get better every day. So I thought that way of thinking, and I think when you see things when you look back, and as I looked back over where I could compete as an academic, it was always in the bottom of the curve. So sort of finding the new things to study, to teach about, to work on, because once a topic in the research world gets to be well known and a lot of people are looking at it and studying it, I can't compete anymore.
You are now listening to the podcast where authors inspire listeners to become authors, the Going North Podcast. I'm your host, certified self-leadership trainer, best-selling author, and book enthusiast, Dom Brightman. And you're going to be listening to a different author that will inspire you to join the business of immortality, known as authorship. Now let the fun begin. Today's episode is sponsored by both books, Going North, Tips and Techniques to Advance Yourself, and the follow-up bestseller, Stay the Course, The Elite Performer's 7 Secret Keys to Sustainable Success. Head over to Amazon.com, pick up both books. They are available in a trifecta of paperback, audio, and ebook. Cop all three of both and be on the lookout for another book from yours truly to help podcasters succeed. Now let's get on with today's episode. And today on the highlight reel builder for authors known as GMP, the Great, Glorious, and Glamorous, it's the Going North Podcast. We got another super special, awesome human for you today, courtesy of podmatch.com. You heard that right, folks. The wonderful site that's basically the farm for super special, awesome humans, because we got another wonderful guest from that site. And funny enough, she's actually the second guest on this show who's actually earned the title of Distinguished Professor. And this one is actually from Boise State University indeed. So she's got all the knowledge indeed, all the apples falling from the tree, keeping all the doctors apple proof indeed, because she is not only a wonderful distinguished professor, she's a world traveler as well as a prolific writer, and she's all about helping folks get to their next level when it comes to their creativity. So let's give it up for the one and only, the fabulous professor, author, and speaker herself, Miss NK and herself, Nancy K. Napier. How you doing today, Nancy?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for inviting me. I was excited about this. Should be fun. I need to tell you, just in case you probably know if you watch any sports, my university, Boise State, is the one that's blue football field. So that's the what we used to say was our main claim to fame. And we call it blue turf thinking here because it means you have to be creative enough and brave enough to have a blue football field. And that's taken us a lot of different places. So it's kind of fun.
There you go. Gotta have that Boise blue field goodness. That's right indeed. Besides, blue is a great color. It's my favorite color of all time, especially that royal blue indeed. That's right indeed.
I think
That's
you
right
like
indeed.
blue and orange from the looks of your background. And those are our colors. They're beautiful. Very good.
Ah, there we go. I knew I said yes to having you on the show for a reason. So my goodness, as with all introductions are not allowed to be 1,554.7 days long, and I probably only covered maybe a 0.7 of what Nancy does. Am I filling in any cavities I may have missed about you? Inform the listeners about how you became the Nancy that you are today, since your first time on the show.
You know, as you say, there's so many different paths to get to where you are. I call myself these days an academic entrepreneur. So I'm been a professor for a long time, which everybody knows what that means, teaching, you do research projects and so forth. But I also love to start stuff. And that means typically academic programs. So I've been lucky enough to do that at Boise State University, which is an entrepreneurial place. So to get to start an undergraduate program in international business for students and to start an executive master's of business program. And then I guess the biggest new venture that I was involved in was to help start up a business school in Vietnam a long time ago in the 1990s and early 2000s. So that's one way I guess I would introduce myself, is that I'm an academic entrepreneur, which means I can't sit still for very long on one topic, whether it's teaching a course or doing research or starting something new. Just have to keep learning and doing something that's a little different, at least for me.
Ah, me lucky indeed. That's what I'm talking about. And hey, it's like, oh shoot, like sweet. She's not just loving to stay in good old Idaho. She likes to travel indeed, get her frequent flyer miles indeed. And probably first time I've ever heard academic entrepreneur, because folks would be like, man, don't those two like can't coexist? Like, aren't they like polar opposites? We gotta keep them kids away from them degrees these days. Get them in the trades, help them to become YouTubers. Like, my goodness, it's great to be able to combine both of those. So my goodness, like what has helped you to really come up with that wonderful realm, I guess, and helping folks to really realize, hey, you can still get your degree and be freaking successful. It doesn't, you have to listen to all the bad news about them.
Well, I think I'm bored easily. And I'm constantly curious about things. And so I can't stay in one area of teaching or research for a long time. And I realized that that's part of the way of thinking that we as humans need. We need to be finding ways to get better every day and find new ways of doing things to allow us to get better every day, which is actually one of the best phrases our football coach, Chris Peterson, used to use. So I thought that way of thinking, and I did it for a long time before I put a name to it. And I think when you see things when you look back, and as I looked back over where I could compete as an academic, it was always in the bottom of the curve. So sort of finding the new things to study, to teach about, to work on, because once a topic in the research world gets to be well known and a lot of people are looking at it and studying it, I can't compete anymore. I know that now. So I'm better at sort of seeing trends or seeing dots that need to be connected than I am on studying. For example, in my field of management and business, there are people who study the area of employee turnover for 20 years. And I thought, no, that's not me. So it has to be something different. So I've gone from looking at women working abroad, professional women who work overseas, what some of their challenges have been. I looked at mergers and acquisitions. I studied developing economies when I worked in Vietnam. And then I got interested in organizational creativity because there's so much research on individuals like musicians and mathematicians and artists, but there wasn't a lot looking at organizations and how they used creativity. So one summer, I am lucky enough to live in a place where we have really high performing organizations, several of them. And I decided I'm going to look at the areas that are as different as they can be. So we have a really fantastic Shakespeare festival. They put on Shakespeare plays in the summer. And we have this incredible software company. And then this football team that has done very well over the years. And I thought they've got to be super different in the way they look at creativity. Well, believe it or not, they had a lot more in common than I believed and that they believed. And then I started adding other organizations, including our county sheriff's office, so law enforcement, jails, and healthcare and marketing firms and a dance company. And that led to probably about 10 years where the leaders of those companies got together on a regular basis. And so it's learning, and we wrote a book about it called Wise Beyond Your Field. So they discovered that the best practices in a field become normal practices. So you have to look outside your field for something new. So that, which is not a brilliant idea, but people don't do it. And so I
Yeah.
found it very interesting to bring these folks together, have them talk about topics that were common to them: leadership, culture in organizations, succession planning, that sort of thing. And they, I'm sure you know from your experience and talking to others, people at the very top of organizations are pretty lonely because they have their boards and they have their employees and they really can't talk to either openly. But when they have peers, especially people who are not in their fields, there's no competition, they can talk and there's no agenda. You can put an idea out there, get feedback. Nobody is hoping you'll take an idea or pushing an agenda. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience to see that happen with them. So anyway, back to academic entrepreneurship. That's all about looking outside of your normal field for ideas and solutions to problems.
There we go. Solutions to those problems indeed. So my goodness, so I guess what's the talk of the town for you now that you're trying to get ahead of the curve of at the moment, or is that currently G14 classified?
I'm trying to stay on top of my regular teaching and executive masters of business participants and so forth. But I tell you what I'm trying to do is learn how to write fiction. I've written nonfiction for 30 years as a professor. I had to. And so I went from academic articles to more accessible writing. So writing books for leaders. I write a column for our local newspaper. I write for Psychology Today. But I thought, okay, pandemic shows up. I'll try to write fiction. And I thought, I've written so much over the years, this should be a breeze. Never make assumptions. Never make assumptions like that. Well, this has turned out to be an incredible challenge. At the same time, I come from a family of tennis players. They're really good. And over the years, my kids would say, you need to learn how to play. And I would take a lesson for 2 days and say, no, let me just be the cheerleader. Well, I decided to learn tennis about the same time. So about a year and a half ago, maybe. And so I'm trying to learn new things, and it's been incredibly fun, but a lot of frustration because I didn't realize there was so much in either field, in the fiction writing or the tennis. And yet, what it has also done, an unexpected benefit, has been it forces me to think of being a beginner. And in my teaching, I teach people who are in average age 42, 43. So these are high level executives on the road to the top of their organizations. But if I'm talking about some topic or helping them learn about it in class, I may know about it, but they don't. So I have to remember to put myself in that role as a beginner. And so that means talking about it, getting them to do exercises, think about things in 3 or 4 or 10 different ways. And that's what I'm learning, that a good instructor of tennis or writing, they help you do the same thing. So that has been a wonderful reminder that I need to do that as a teacher. I can't just, well, you can never say something once and expect that it will stick. So my rule of thumb is you have to do it at least 5 to 7 times before there's any hope that it'll stay in your mind or in your body. So that's what I'm working on these days is learning to be a beginner and then trying to learn a couple new skills in the process.
Beautiful indeed. Kind of reminds me of that good old word, Shoshin, the good old beginner's mind. Indeed. That's right. Indeed. That's right. Indeed. For setting yourself to the beginning. Indeed. It's like, oh, yeah. It's like, oh, man, I got 3 decades of writing. I'm a friggin' beast of this thing. I'm a distinguished professor. This is fitting to be a breeze. And then good
Should be.
old.
Well,
and then
you know
life
what?
hits you in the face real quick.
Oh my gosh. And I've heard and I've read about, tried to do the beginner's mind thing for years, and it's always been theory. And so now to actually be a beginner, seriously being a beginner in two different fields, mind and body, I finally get it. And the best thing is it allows me to say, I'm not good at this. Don't expect to be good. I just wrote a little piece about my one in tennis instructor. I was so frustrated about a month ago. He said, Nancy, just care less. I said, what are you talking about? He said, don't think about it. Just play. Don't care about it. Just care less about being right and perfect. And he's so right. And so to let go of those expectations that so many of us have about trying to do something the right way, the one way, the perfect way, that has been, I mean, it's taken me a long time to feel it. I knew it theoretically, as I say, but to actually do it at this stage, I guess this has been really fun. I have always, because I've done so many different research topics over the years, about every 7 years, I'm a brand new beginner in that topic and I have to learn about it. But I not consciously thought about what that means when I'm trying to learn something I thought I would know how to do, writing fiction or playing some sport. No, it's been a really wonderful experience when it's not frustrating.
Yeah, definitely indeed. So, anything else you've learned in this beginner's mind mode that you're on with your fiction novels? It's looks like you're writing four at the same time, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, a couple of things. One is that I'm sure you are, most of the people on these kind of podcasts can be pretty driven people. We have a goal, we want to have a plan to get there, and we probably set expectations of timelines and so forth on ourselves. And I am very much that way. And I realized with this novel writing process, again, I've written so much fiction over the years, and I know about revising, and I can do that very well. Well, this process of writing and then revising and then rewriting the whole thing, if you have to, I'm just astounded at how much more time it's taking me than I expected. And so I've had to, and again, about a month or so ago, I set my own deadlines and I wasn't meeting them, and I failed. And I thought, no, it takes as long as it takes. And again, that's one of those theoretical comments you hear, but it finally made sense. And I thought, I don't have anything to prove. I've had a great career. I've done all the writing and publishing I need to do. This is for me. So just slow it down if it needs to slow down, dang on it, and enjoy the process. So that's, again, sort of everybody knows that, but me, I'm late to the table on that one, I guess. So that has been a great learning. And I've also discovered I've been, again, probably many people you talk to, pretty independent and think I can learn things on my own and get things done on my own. I've learned in this process that I do need to ask for help, that there are actually experts out there who know how this process works of getting the structure of a book together, all the 57 things you have to remember. They can actually help me learn that. And so that's been a weight off my shoulders to say, why not? People go to universities to speed up the learning process. Why not take advantage of that in something I'm trying to learn on my own? And so if we can find people who are willing and able to help us in whatever way it might be, encouragement, but really for me, it's been in the skill learning. I can speed that up and reach those how you hit a plateau. I can keep those plateaus a little bit shorter than if I'm only doing it on my own. During the pandemic, when I first got interested in this, I wrote, man, in 5 months, I thought that was the best, not the best, but I thought it was an okay book. Sent it around to a few people, the first 20 pages, and they just blasted it. And I thought, well, maybe this isn't as easy as I expected. So it forced me to stop and say, all right, is there a way to learn faster? So not necessarily more efficiently, but more effectively. So I can learn chunks better and then use those going forward. And that's so obvious and all that. And I do that in the classroom from the other side of the table. So it's good to be a student and remind myself of those things. It sounds pretty basic, doesn't it?
Ha ha! I forgot to take myself off your mute. Anyways, as I was saying so brilliantly, even though the darn microphone ruined everything, it actually even goes with what I said. Yeah, good old life gives us that good old humble pie every now and then, where
Yeah.
it's like, oh, come back down to earth, buddy. Yeah, you got the world championship in the land of teaching as a professor. Yeah, so go ahead and write this fiction novel real quick. Like, oh, I got this covered. Bam! Oh, what the heck were you
No.
smoking when you wrote this?
No, no, not at all. Not at all. It's just, yeah. And the wonderful thing about teaching is that if you blow it in one class, you have the next one to come back up to speed. And so that's what I'm finding out in trying to write the fiction, is that I can always revise it. I don't have to show it to anybody until I think I'm really ready. And I mean, I think about people who perform theater, music, whatever. I know they've rehearsed, but that's live in front of people. They can't take that back as easily. I can keep bringing it back to revise it until I decide it's ready to go. So I'm not nearly as brave as many people like that would be. I know that.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about indeed. But hey, that's definitely a brave step forward because it's like, hey, you're stepping onto a realm that's definitely new for you and focusing on the new things indeed. So speaking of new, I know it was new at one time going over to Vietnam and starting a school, no less, and being a teacher there. So how was that experience and how it made you a better professor?
Oh, that's a good question. So I started by going over there to teach people who had 1 year of learning English. They had never heard words like marketing, customer service, credit, credit cards, working capital, marketing. And so our job was to deliver a master's of business program. So they were learning those pieces of language, the business language, so that Vietnam could do business with uh, the world outside of the Soviet Union. That had been their only trading partner. So they had to learn how to do business with North America, with Australia, with Europe. So that was fascinating in terms of basically, again, trying to explain an idea or help them learn it by experiencing it in ways that would be much shorter, I think, here in America. So the patience involved and realizing how brilliant these people are were at the time, but they just had never had exposure to some of these ideas. Someone said we use the ABC method of teaching. A is for advertising, B is for budget, C is for customer. And we put those on the board and we talk about them so we know where we are in our lectures. And I'm thinking, no, we're going to have to get you to think about how the pieces all fit together, what this language is, but what does it really mean? Why is it important? And then we had to help them learn how to think critically. This is not something that in a planned economy, communist controlled economy, was something that went on. So that's changed in Vietnam for sure. People are much better at questioning and thinking and analyzing. But in the 90s, they were coming out of being told what to do in all aspects of their lives. So that was very interesting. And I guess part of what it taught me is that we foreigners, I was one of the first Americans to go. So it was Canadians and Europeans and Australians who were teaching. We go over thinking we're bringing all this knowledge, and yet there is so much knowledge that came the other direction. And a lot of foreigners were unwilling to accept that there was knowledge by the Vietnamese that we could learn from, and then they weren't willing to absorb it. So that was a huge lesson for me to realize that we think we outsiders are providing all the knowledge when in turn it's not going to be useful to anybody unless we understand their system, their culture, what they're going through, and we can help them package it in a way that they can use it, and that they, as teachers, most of these people we were training were professors, and then about 30% were business people. So a long way of saying it taught me a lot of patience. It taught me the reason I went into teaching. One of the first times I was there, I went to the canteen for lunch. The professors didn't even go. They thought it was so bad. So it was only students and the foreign professors sit at a little wooden table, plastic tablecloth, chickens running around and dogs running around and ladies chopping up meat on the floor. And I had my lunch there. And a young man came over and said, "Can I practice my English?" And I said, "Of course, sit down." And he said he was studying accounting. And I said, "Wow, with an accounting degree, you'll be able to get a really good job." So at that time, professors at the university were making $20 a month, and an accountant at a foreign company might make $50 a month. He said, "No, no, I want to stay here and teach." He said, "I can do more for my country if I become a teacher than if I go and work for a foreign company." And that just shook me up in a good way. I thought, wow, when's the last time one of my students in Boise would say, "I'm learning this so that I can do more for my country"? So that was, most of us who went said, "Oh, this is why we got into teaching, to help people who want to do something good beyond themselves, not just make money, but do something good beyond themselves." So that was huge. And there were so many moments like that that I was fortunate to experience and take away. It was huge, just a huge, hard. I'd say it's the most stimulating professional experience I've had, probably the toughest, to be away from family and travel back and forth. I had my children with me for a semester, and that was good and hard for them. But yeah, overall, what a time to be there. So we went from a period in the early 90s when they were just coming out of starvation and just really tough times, to now the people we taught and worked with are running the country, basically. I did a book called The Bridge Generation about that group of people, because they grew up during wartime and during this terrible famine period after the American War was over. So they went through wartime and then this famine time and now boom time. So they are leading the country in education, in business, in government. And that has been a huge, again, an incredible privilege to be involved in something like that. So it's been a real learning. And again, that was had a lot of learning curves to go up, learning the culture, learning the political system enough not to talk about it, and changes and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I guess that's another gift of the good old USA. You can joke about your political leaders a bit. Other countries like, yeah, joke on this in the afterlife, buddy. And then you wake up, it's like, oh man, why am
Mm-hmm.
I a camel? What the
Mm-hmm.
heck?
Yeah. 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 Well, it's been that was a career game changer for me. And it came about, of course, as many good things do, serendipity. We had the opportunity to be in Vietnam for a year to deliver the Masters of Business. And then the Vietnamese and the funders from Sweden asked us to continue on. So we were there for a total of 9 years. As I tell people, I went to Vietnam with brown hair and I left with white hair. So it was a long but good experience. But to see a country at that stage of its changes and the people's changes are just phenomenal to me. And so now I go back and I get to see all these folks who are doing so well, which for a teacher is a real wonderful experience to do that. So anyway, that's been a very good one in many ways. Actually, just before I talked with you, I talked with a young man who was born, he's Vietnamese, but he lives now in Texas, and he's also doing some podcasts and some videos and different ways to try and bridge generations of Vietnamese and young Vietnamese, older ones, and bridge industries. So getting different types of industries, creative and more traditional, to talk to each other, and then bridge geographies. So Vietnam with America. And so I'm just delighted to see that we need more bridging in the world. And so I like that he's trying to do that in such a positive way.
Beautiful indeed. Was he inspired by your book?
Oddly enough, he contacted me on LinkedIn a week ago because he had interviewed one of the women. She runs the Fulbright University in Saigon in Vietnam. She told him about the book, and so he got it and he was reading it and contacted me. So I think we'll have some good ways to collaborate, I hope. But yeah, just that notion of bridging now, it seems to be coming up in a lot of different places. But I love the energy. I love that he's got something bigger in mind of what he wants to do with his life. And it's not just about making money. It's much more than that. And some of the things he's trying to do, who knows, they could change the way Vietnamese and American societies, little pockets, the way they see each other. And I hope so.
That's what I'm talking about. Indeed. That's right, indeed. Collaboration over competition, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. You can get more done together by building those wonderful
Right.
bridges. That's
Right.
right,
I think
indeed.
so.
Heck yeah. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. Well, sweet. So it sounds like you had a wonderful 9-year tour of duty that made you a better professor. You love to see it. On top of everything else.
Yeah, it was a good one. My father had been in Vietnam. He was an army officer a long time ago, and he was there in
Oh,
the early part of the Vietnam. Well, it was before the Vietnam War, actually, so nobody knew where Vietnam was. And then I married a man who was a conscientious objector, had grown up in Germany, and so he argued that after World War II, the German youth were taught they were demilitarized. So he said, I never carried a gun, I didn't play cops and robbers, so I'll go into the army as a medic, but not as a combatant. And of course, he was terrified when he heard about my dad being this army officer guy. Of course, they got along perfectly and saw things very similarly. But I loved that when this opportunity for me to go to Vietnam came up, they were both incredibly supportive. No bitterness, just really supportive about, okay, this is a new phase. What's it going to be like? So, yeah, that's good.
that's what I'm talking about. Indeed. That's what I'm talking about. Indeed. Sweet. So my goodness, so since you've been on a boatload of interviews talking about the good work that you've been doing to help out the countless folks around the globe, is there a question that you wish folks would ask you more often?
Ooh, that's a very good one. I guess it would be how can we get along better? How can we find ways to build those bridges across whatever groups we're talking about? It doesn't have to be across countries. It's I'm sure you hear a lot of it and see a lot of it as no matter where you live, that there's so much pulling apart that makes me sad to see. And so I don't have a solution, but I guess just to help people start thinking about ways that we could bridge I won't say bridge our differences. I guess what I loved about working with this group of diverse organizations was they bridged their similarities. And so they found ways that they could learn from each other because of some of the similar challenges they felt. And so in an organization, it's how do you build a really positive culture that makes people want to be part of something that's bigger than they are. And so you're sparking an idea of, is there something I should work on to see if there's a way to do that? I know lots of people are trying to do it in different ways, but if each of us could find something every day to do that might bridge our understanding with another person, another group, I think we need that. So maybe now that's a new research project for me, Dom. Thank you. Thank you. Good idea. What have you found? Are there any good places, groups that you've seen or people that you've seen that are trying to do some good work in that area?
Man, off the top of my head, wow, nothing's coming to mind right off the top of my head at the moment. Cause yeah, you're right. Kind of like with the way things are, especially in the US of A, it's like they're trying to keep us divided. Where it's like, hey, let's build bridges of based on our similarities. Like, hey, you get along well with this thing. It's like, oh, you like to play tennis? Oh, me
Mhm.
too. All right,
There
cool.
you go. There you
It's like,
go. Well,
I do.
now and then, don't you see things like the telescope, the new Webb telescope, when that happened, or when there's something, I just heard an interview with someone who talks about research on awe, that there are certain times when we see something like the Northern Lights, or we see some of those photos of universe, that we're just stunned by how beautiful it is. And so this researcher was saying that's a way that can bring people together when there's this common sense of awe. And so trying to think about what might that be, and it often is something in nature, doesn't have to be. It could be a piece of music or something, but are there ways for us to come together in awe? I don't know yet, but that I've got that on my list of things to think about and learn more about, just going forward. I need some of that in my own life, so I'll see what I can find.
There you go. Something amazing, wonderful, and energetic.
Yeah,
That's right indeed. That's right indeed. All the
yeah.
all. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Having a state of awe.
State of awe. I like that. Yeah, very cool.
That's right indeed. Well, speaking of bridges, my goodness, at the time of this recording, if I'm not mistaken, most recent book is The Bridge Generation of Vietnam. So if that book were a food, what would it be and why?
Well, I'm going to answer that in a way you probably don't expect. When I was writing that book, I had a friend of mine took a look at a chapter, and she said, boy, she used to work for PBS in Atlanta, I think, and did documentaries. She said, I can see this. What if you made a film? So we made a documentary about it using some of the people in the book. The documentary is called From We to Me. So Vietnam, because of its hardships, it had a sense of very strong community. Now, as younger people are becoming more independent, they access the internet, they want to choose their own careers, they want to choose their own marriage partners, whatever it might be. And the film did a nice job of, I'm trying to think, at least one critical couple of the scenes, but in one, with one character, food was the brought people together. And so I think so often that will do it. And again, I've spent so much time in Vietnam. You may know that it's like China and places where all the food goes to the center of the table. And so it's this family style. And so you're all there. You eat what you want, as much as you want or as little, but everything's out there together, and you're all sticking your chopsticks into the food together. And so I guess it would, the book would have to be something around the family food gathering of Vietnam. Part of the book talks about this period after the Americans left, so from 1975 to about 1986, when Vietnam was fighting two other wars, and so they were still sending food to the soldiers, so people didn't have enough to eat. Everything was rationed, so they might have 2 bowls of rice a day. And so the notion of food is so central to the people, because they didn't have it, and now they have enough food. And yet the older ones, of course, say, I never take it for granted. I always know that I may not have enough food to eat, and I know what that feels like. Because when I first got to know them, they were, well, I'm not a huge person, but they were probably half my size, men's belts wrapped all the way around their backs and flapped. They had, again, they've had very little to eat. So they went from this starvation, very little to eat period, to one where they have enough food for their kids. They would give their children food instead of eating it. And now they can all have enough food. So the book is about going from poverty and not enough to having enough. And now they're concerned about, if we have too much, fill in the blank, food, cars, comfortable places to live, clothing, money to send our kids abroad to school, where's that going to take us? And that's why the idea of going from we to me, the independent one, that worries the bridge generation, these people that were children during the Vietnam War and then now are in their 50s, 40s, and 50s. So are we Vietnamese, they would say, are we losing the sense of community where we all sat around and ate together, to now we go our independent ways? And what will that mean to the families? to a village, to a city, to a community. So they're concerned about it. I'm not sure they feel like they can do much about it, but at least they're aware of it and talking about it. So yeah, so it would be going from no food or little food to plenty of food and what that might mean. But as far as a particular food, I'd have to think about that a little more.
There you go. I guess hot pot maybe. That's right indeed. Some
Yeah,
random giant
yeah,
pot,
it is a
whatever
hot pot.
surrounding.
Yeah, very, very common. Yeah, very common. Nice.
Yeah, that's right indeed. The pot's so hot everybody leaves with red eyes and all the munchies. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Let me stop.
Well, you must have crab bakes, right? Is that a community type of event? Or am I missing anything? Not remembering crab. Clam
Usually,
bakes. Yeah.
oh yeah, that's right, crab bakes, but yeah, mostly crab. Well, to be honest, it's really more of hammering the crabs. It's like, yeah, go ahead and steam them, dump some Old Bay on them, grab some hammers, just smash them open. That's right indeed. Make sure you
Nice.
gather on a table. Make sure you
Yeah.
grab yesterday's newspaper, use it as a tablecloth because they get messy.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. But you're all together around a table.
Heck yeah, that's right indeed. No campfire songs are usually sung there, usually. But if they are sung there, then well, I guess someone's under the influence of no
Mm-hmm.
influence.
Nice.
Yeah, man. So my goodness, we're coming down to the magical question that every guest gets to receive. And that is if you don't wake up tomorrow and you were 25 again, but you're still in the current year. What advice would you give to yourself?
It's trite. I would say take more risks. Don't be afraid of fitting in. I realized probably in my 30s, I didn't fit in, never would, but I tried for 35 years to fit what I thought people expected. And once I figured out that I was an academic entrepreneur, that I was better at certain kinds of research, that I needed to be at a place like Boise State, which was off the map for most people. I had done my PhD and taught at really big time universities. I didn't fit there. And so to come here to a place that encouraged entrepreneurship, encouraged me to try different things, that was huge. So it took me though that long, 15 years or so, to figure out that that's what I needed to do. So I would say take more risk. I mean, what most of us don't work in jobs where people will die. I'm not a surgeon. And for me, at least, one of the only real decision you cannot undo is having children. You can change your vocation, your spouse, where you live. So you can change things if it doesn't work. And it just takes a little bit of courage and willingness to jump. And frankly, that is one thing about this country that for years the Vietnamese would say, you can change. You can try something new. We're told what we're supposed to study and who we're supposed to marry. And that was something that was blew them away. And I'd say, well, let's just try it. What happens if it goes wrong? We'll try something else. So I guess that's what I would tell myself. I'm glad I finally learned it, but I wish I'd known it a little bit earlier. How about you? What would you tell yourself?
Oh yeah, that's right indeed. Oh, definitely tell myself a lot of things indeed. It's like, hey, that's right, jump into the magical pool for no reason. That's right, make sure you have a dragon mask on too while you're doing it. That's right
Mm-hmm.
indeed.
Mm-hmm.
So that way both can know it's the pool nest monster. The Loch Ness monster's already been taken.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you have used the word magic, I think, 3 times. We went down to Los Angeles a few weekends ago. I have 2 sons who live down there. And we went to what's called the Magic Castle, which is an old mansion that became a kind of school for magicians. And now magicians come to perform there all the time. I assume it's more than just the weekends. And so I talked to one magician who said, back to your question. He said, my parents wanted me to study business. and I tried and I studied marketing, but then magic kept drawing me. And I thought, well, shoot, marketing is magic, right? You're trying to, but that notion of magic, and that we are doing things that seem impossible to those that look at us, maybe to ourselves. I think that's a concept I'm going to play with a little bit more. I love it. So the notion of what is magic? It's something we can't see all the time, we can't understand, but we accept that it's inspiring, frankly. So keep using that word.
My magical pleasure indeed.
There you go. There you go. I love it.
I know what else is magic. You're gonna make 4 magical best-selling fiction novels appear. So for those need to
I hope you're right. I hope you're right. Good at predictions, are you?
More like encourager. Funny enough, a past guest on the show, she was a career coach. I think she still does career coaching. Yeah, a bright head and the shoulders that she has. But anyway, she actually had a dream to write a fiction novel series for the youth, and it took her a few years to do it. And she went through the process of writing the first draft and having the editor be like, "What the hell you wrote here?" Just tearing it all up and then starting it all over again. And then she eventually got 3 books out, nice little thin, easy to read books for the kiddos, and she won awards for them. So hey, it's gonna
Oh,
happen
that's
for you too.
wonderful. Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, that's so good to hear. Thanks. That's good. That's inspiring. Appreciate it.
Yeah, that's right indeed. That's right indeed. You're already halfway there. You started, so it's like, hey,
That's
might as
true.
well keep going.
That's true. Absolutely. That's the biggest step, isn't it? Just getting going.
That's
I'll
right
do it.
indeed. So when you have those 4 statues of David, how folks can keep in contact with you when you finally put him on display in your museum, metaphorically.
I think the best way is through the website, which is nancyknapier.com. And so that would be a good way. And then I'm on LinkedIn, and email is on there. So that would be, all those are good.
Woohoo! Well, there you have it, folks. Reach out to the good professor herself, the distinguished professor, the one and only Nancy K. Napier herself. That's right, indeed. We'll put a link to her wonderful website in the show notes so that we can keep up with all the stuff that she's doing, especially when she finally releases her fiction novels. Indeed, we'll definitely have her back on the show to talk about how the process was to finally go through that refining fire and come out the other side alive. That's right,
Oh, I
indeed.
hope
She'll have
so.
her. Well, ain't no hope. It'll happen. You got years and gas left in your tank. You
There
got it.
you
You got
go.
this
Oh,
thing
aren't you
happening.
nice?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So my goodness. So you only got like maybe 0.75% of what she has to offer. So check out her site for the other 99.25% indeed. So my goodness, any parting words before we close up
I
shop?
just appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate being with you, but I just love that you're doing these podcasts and getting such interesting, insightful, and inspiring people in front of all the rest of us.
If you're hearing this part of the episode, that means you're one cool individual. Thanks a bunch for tuning in, and if you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to share it with at least one other person in your network. Bonus points for 3. And be sure to check out the backlog too while you're at it, because there are hundreds of wonderful episodes to choose from as well.